Welcome to Books in Brief.
Today, we're embarking on a crucial deep dive into a text that, while it's decades old, really remains the definitive rulebook for commercial success. It's the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, Violate Them at Your Own Risk, written by the marketing strategists Al Ries and Jack Trout.
And when they chose that title, they were not exaggerating, not at all. The whole foundation of this book is that marketing is governed by these fixed fundamental laws, just like the laws of physics.
Exactly.
If you want to build an airplane, you have to respect gravity. And if you want to successfully market a product, Ries and Trout argue, you absolutely have to adhere to these 22 laws.
That's their starting point. It's this profound critique of, well, of corporate America, really. They ask, why do massive, well-funded corporations, and they name names like IBM, General Motors, Sears, Roebuck, why do they waste billions on campaigns that just fail?
And what's their answer?
It's because their entire programs are based on flawed assumptions. They ignore these fundamental immutable laws. They actually call it corporate incompetence, born from just ignoring principles that have been true for a century.
Which immediately reframes the whole mission for you, the listener. It's not about having the biggest budget or, the smartest people in the room. It's about acknowledging that the market operates under rules you just cannot bend. So our mission today is to pull out the most powerful and, honestly, the most counterintuitive of these laws and show you exactly where the battle is really being fought.
Let's start with, I think, the most revolutionary idea, the one that flips conventional wisdom on its head. It's the law of leadership. And it says that it's better to be first than it is to be better.
Wait, okay, hold on. How can that possibly be true? We spend billions, literally billions on R&D to create the superior product. Surely, in the long run, the superior product wins.
See, that's the flaw Riz and Trout identify. That's the product-centric view. The reason being first in the marketplace matters is only because it allows you to invoke the law of the mind.
Okay, so what's that?
It's that it's better to be first in the prospect's mind than to be first in the actual marketplace. Marketing isn't a battle of products, it's a battle of perception.
Ah, okay. So that real estate inside the consumer's head, that's the most valuable commodity. We instinctively know this, right? Even if we don't realize it. I mean, Everyone knows Charles Lindbergh, first to fly the Atlantic solo.
Exactly, but almost nobody knows Burt Hinkler.
Who's Burt Hinkler?
He was the second person to make that solo flight. And here's the thing, Hinkler was arguably a better pilot. He flew faster, he used less fuel, but history doesn't care. It only rewards the mental leader. If you look at any dominant category today, Hertz, Coca-Cola, Miller Lite as the first domestic light beer, they dominate because they were first to lock down that position in your mind.
This leads right into what I think is maybe the most radical concept in the entire book, the law of perception. If the battle is in the mind, then the authors argue there is no objective reality. There is no best product. There are only perceptions in the customer's mind.
Yes, the perception is the reality.
That's a huge shift.
It is. We assume marketing is about convincing people of objective facts. Ries and Trout say you're just wasting your time. Look at the new Coke disaster. I mean, the Coca-Cola company spent millions, conducted 200,000 taste tests that scientifically proved new Coke tasted better than Coca-Cola Classic.
So why did it fail so spectacularly? I mean, Classic came back and is still dominant.
Because the consumer's perception was completely fixed. They didn't see Coke as just a sugary drink. They perceived it as a piece of American history, an old, reliable friend. No amount of blind taste tests could ever change that mental connection. People believe what they want to believe.
And that fixed perception can even limit a global company's reach. The book points out that in the U.S., Honda means cars. It's a leading brand. But in Japan, where Honda was first famous for motorcycles, that perception still lingers, and it actually hurts their car sales.
Even though the cars are identical worldwide.
Exactly. The position in the mind holds fast.
Okay, so if we accept that marketing is a battle for the mind, what do you do if you miss the boat? What if you are the second or third person to fly the Atlantic?
Right. What then?
Then you invoke the law of the category. If you can't be first in an existing category, you have to create a new one that you can be first in. You didn't miss the Atlantic flight, you just needed a different kind of flight.
Like Amelia Earhart, she secured her place in history, not as the third person to fly in the Atlantic, but as the first woman to do so. She literally established a new category where she had zero competition.
Precisely. Or think about beer. Anheuser-Busch couldn't beat Heineken, the first imported beer. So they created Michelob, the first high-priced domestic beer, and they immediately dominated that new segment. The key lesson here is when you're first in a new category, you have to promote the category itself, not just your brand.
Tell the world why they need this new thing.
Exactly.
So once a category is established, the law of the ladder comes into play. You have to acknowledge and build your strategy around the fact that the prospect's mind organizes products into a hierarchy, and your brand is sitting on a very specific rung.
The famous Avis story is the perfect example of this. For years, they tried to claim they had the finest rent-a-cars, just wasting money trying to challenge Hertz head-on.
Which didn't work.
It never works.
Yeah.
They only found success when they embraced their rung. Their slogan became, Avis is only number 2 in rent-a-cars, so why go with us? We try harder. They acknowledged the leader and used their number 2 position as a strength.
That hierarchy also sort of predicts the future of a category, which brings us to the law of duality. Early on, categories might have dozens of competing brands, but eventually they almost always consolidate into a tight two-horse race.
Like Coke and Pepsi,
Hertz and Avis.
Kodak and Fuji, you see it everywhere. And that's why you see number 3 brands like Sprint or Royal Crown Cola consistently struggling in mature markets.
Yeah.
The battle is fought between the top 2, and that's where all the consumer's mental energy is focused.
So if you are that strong number 2, like an Avis or a Pepsi, you have to leverage the law of the opposite. You can't just say you're better. You have to turn the leader's strength into a weakness by positioning yourself as the alternative.
The Tylenol versus aspirin example is brilliant. Aspirin was the entrenched leader, but over its long history, it had accumulated some baggage, specifically the risk of stomach bleeding. Tylenol didn't focus on its benefits, it focused on aspirin's negative.
Right.
Their whole campaign was, for the millions who should not take aspirin. By setting itself up as the immediate alternative, Tylenol earned a massive share of the market. You have to be different, not just a little bit improved.
Okay, so if competitive strategy is all about positioning, then execution is about discipline. This brings us to the law of focus. RIES and Trout call this the most powerful concept in marketing. Owning a single, specific word in the prospect's mind.
And we're talking about true mental ownership here. When you hear safety, you think
Volvo.
overnight.
Cavities.
Cavities. That's the entire strategy right there, distilled into one undeniable concept.
And the flip side of that is the danger, which is the law of exclusivity. You cannot take a word that's already owned by someone else. It's a total waste of money because all you do is end up reinforcing the leader.
Like with the batteries.
Exactly. When Everty launched the Energizer Bunny, they were trying to claim the word long-lasting, but all they did was reinforce Duracell's position as the established long-life battery.
And that inherent drive for more, trying to claim multiple words, chasing multiple markets, that leads us to the most frequently violated law in the whole book, the law of line extension. Oh, this one is huge. This is where companies use a successful brand name on new, unrelated products because the pressure to leverage that established brand equity is just, well, they say it's irresistible.
It's corporate temptation.
And it's lethal long term. This ties right into the law of perspective, which warns you that the effects of marketing don't happen right away, and the long-term results are often the exact opposite of the short-term benefit.
Let's unpack that because this is a trap that catches huge, smart companies. Line extension often gives you an immediate short-term sales boost. So, Budweiser launches Bud Light and the stock analysts cheer.
But the long-term reality is dilution. It's grim. Miller High Life sales tripled for 5 years after Miller Lite launched, a huge short-term win. But from its peak in 1979, Miller High Life sales declined for 13 years straight because the brand had lost its singular, focused meaning.
If your name is on everything, it means nothing.
That's it. A1 means steak sauce. So
Right.
A1 poultry sauce will always fail because the name is already fixed in your head.
So the antidote to this, to line extension, is the law of sacrifice. Success in marketing actually requires giving something up. You simply cannot be all things to all people.
You have to sacrifice your product line or your target market or even just the urge for constant change. Federal Express crushed Emery Air Freight because FedEx sacrificed everything but small packages for overnight delivery. Emery tried to be a full-service freight airline, had no focus, and they eventually just vanished.
And Pepsi-Cola. They sacrificed everyone but the teenage market back in the early 60s. They positioned Coke as the old generation's drink. That narrow focus enabled them to close the gap on Coke dramatically. The 50-year-old might still drink Pepsi to feel younger, But the targeted message was powerful because of the segment they sacrificed.
Now we get to the self-inflicted wounds, because these laws are often violated not by necessity, but by corporate ego. The law of success warns that success breeds arrogance, and arrogance leads to failure.
This is the executive trap, isn't it? They start to substitute their own brilliant judgment or their successful name for what the market is actually telling them. They feel like they're above the laws.
Absolutely. Think of Ken Olsen, the incredibly successful founder of Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC. He famously dismissed personal computers and RISC technology as gimmicks.
Because he was blinded by his current success.
Totally. Blinded by the success of his current product line, he ignored a fundamental shift in the market, and that led to DEC's eventual collapse. That's the CEO equivalent of Blockbuster refusing to believe streaming was a real threat. The bigger you are, the more likely you are to lose touch with the front line.
And when mistakes inevitably happen, the law of failure has to be observed. Failure is to be expected and accepted. You have to be willing to cut your losses early. We see this today when major companies pivot and just drop entire product divisions.
And the authors point out that cultural differences play a huge role here. Japanese consensus management often made it easier to walk away from failing projects because the stigma of admitting I was wrong wasn't attached to one single person's career.
That's interesting. You have to be nimble enough to admit defeat. And speaking of admitting things, there's tremendous power in the law of candor. Admitting a negative can earn you a positive because candor is just so disarming.
This is such a brilliant counterintuitive strategy. When you admit a flaw, people instantly trust you more. They open their minds. Listerine is the classic example. The taste you hate twice a day.
Right.
That instantly accepted negative statement sets up the positive belief that, hey, anything that tastes that bad must be powerful enough to kill germs.
It shifts the entire dynamic from marketing hype to, to something that feels like honesty. So finally, we need to talk about timing. The law of acceleration states that successful programs are built on trends, like the slow, powerful pull of the tide knot on fads, which are just quick, slashy waves.
Fads, like the Ninja Turtles or Cabbage Patch Kids in their day, they generate this massive short-term hype, but they collapse quickly. And they often leave companies with huge overhead and inventory they can't sell. Trends, like the Barbie doll, are powerful but often kind of invisible at first.
So what's the strategy?
If you are faced with a fad, the best strategy is actually to dampen the hype, handle it conservatively, to try and stretch it out into a longer, more sustainable trend.
And then wrapping this whole system up, the law of resources reminds us that none of this works without adequate fuel.
You might have the most brilliant, focused idea in the world, an idea that perfectly adheres to all the other 21 laws. But if you don't have the money to get that idea into the prospect's mind, it's worthless. Money is required not just to launch, but to maintain your position, because that battle is ongoing.
So what does this all mean for you, the person trying to actually apply these rules? The book really provides a challenging lens to view corporate strategy through.
I think the central conflict is that these laws, which demand focus, sacrifice, candor, and acknowledging that perception is reality, they run directly against human nature. They run against corporate ego, and they run against the conventional wisdom of just trying to be better than the competition. The temptation to violate them for that short-term financial boost is always there.
Which is why the warning in the title is so critical.
Exactly.
And the final provocative thought here builds on that arrogance trap.
Yeah.
How often does a company fail simply because it refuses to attack its own successful divisions? IBM could have introduced a personal mainframe to deal with the rising workstation trend, but the fear of cannibalizing their existing, very profitable business paralyzed them. Sometimes the willingness to destroy your own current success is the only way to cope with the future.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this brief exploration of the book, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel for future episodes. New book insights are coming soon.
See you next time.